It was the largest land mammal that ever roamed the planet. When we think of big, we always think of dinosaurs. But in this podcast episode, we're going to talk about an animal that was gigantic, even compared to some of the dinosaurs. But this thing wasn't a dinosaur, it was a mammal.
Welcome to Dinosaur George Kids, a show for anyone who loves dinosaurs. Dinosaur George has studied paleontology for over 50 years and has performed live to over 4 million students across the world. So sit back and enjoy today's show. Now, here's Dinosaur George.
Hey there, future paleontologists. I'm Dinosaur George. How you guys doing? I hope everybody's doing well. Summer is in full swing, at least here in South Central Texas. It has been hot, really hot. Constantly seems warmer and warmer. I will tell you this, though. We've had some rain these last couple of days, which is super good because all the plants need the rain and all the animals need the plants and all the world needs something good. And this podcast is a place where you can find some good. Hope everybody is doing well. This is podcast episode number 106. We've had 1,216,000 downloads of this podcast. We are heard in 182 countries and in 16,604 cities across the world. We have listeners in countries all over the planet. I'm honored to have you listen. One of these days, I'm going to take a worldwide tour and go visit some of the countries, especially those countries where we have so many listeners. Switzerland, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, all over Europe. And of course, those faraway countries like Canada. Okay, that was a joke. Canada isn't that far away. You know, I used to go to Canada once a year, and I loved it. I used to do a series of talks outside of Edmonton. Can't remember the name of the town. Boy, that's crazy. But anyway, it's this outdoor place that has all these life-size robotic dinosaurs. And I used to be able to go do a talk out there, which is great because these robot dinosaurs were all placed in a forested area, and they look so much more realistic than those that are oftentimes like in buildings and stuff like that. So I used to get out there and do that, and I loved it. I miss going to Canada. I miss the cooler weather. It was absolutely cooler. Speaking about robotic dinosaurs, I am speaking at the San Antonio Zoo on July 6th and 7th and August 17th and 18th. On those 4 days, the year's 2024. So July 6th and 7th, 2024, and August 17th and 18th, 2024. I speak at 11 o'clock. I'm inside the zoo because that's where they put all the robotic dinosaurs. They have this amazing temporary exhibit there with robot dinosaurs all over the zoo. How cool is that, right? You come out to the zoo, you get to see all the amazing animals, and then you also get to see these robotic dinosaurs. So it's a great combination. It's a great match, and I'm so honored that I get the opportunity to go out there. So if you are in or around San Antonio the weekend of July 6th and 7th or August 17th and 18th, make it a point to stop by the San Antonio Zoo. I am speaking in an area called the Great Lawn, and that's just a big open area where they have tables and canopy set up, and even if it's hot, you guys get to be in the shade. And so it's a lot of fun, and I hope you come out, and I hope I get to meet you face to face. If you are coming to San Antonio, or if you live in San Antonio, I also hope you'll stop by my museum and store located at Traders Village in San Antonio. The museum, half of the building is a museum and the other half is a gift shop. So in the museum side, we have all kinds of specimens from all over the world, some really amazing stuff. I've got stuff from the Permian all the way to the Pleistocene. So basically from before the age of dinosaurs to the Ice Age. So there's all sorts of things. Giant elk the Irish elk skull, megalodon jaws, giant bison, mammoth, big Columbian mammoth. This zoo's big. You know, when we talk about mammoths, most people immediately think of the woolly mammoth, but there was a lot of different species of elephants. And the Columbian mammoth, sometimes called the southern mammoth, is really one of the larger members of the mammoth group. And so if you come out there and you see the size of these tusks, you simply won't believe how big this thing is. So anyway, I hope you'll consider stopping by. I hope you will consider following us on the Dinosaur George Kids Facebook group page. So much cool stuff posted there. People posting pictures, images of vacations, places where they've gone, posting pictures of their dinosaur toys, their figures. It's a great place. It's a family-friendly place. We work very hard to maintain it. I can tell you that Alexis, who is our director of all social media, she stays on top of it to make absolutely sure that it is a family-safe place to be. All right, let's do some shout-outs. Now, I just mentioned the zoo, and it turns out some of you came to see me out there. So first of all, I want to give a shout out to Lawrence and his cousin Catherine, who were out there at the zoo. It's so nice. I told Lawrence, Lawrence is my middle name and Catherine is my mom's first name. So I told them both to stop stealing my family name. Lawrence, it was so nice meeting you and your mom and your cousin Catherine, and I hope you enjoyed my live show. Then Henry Rex. Henry is a club member. Henry has, I see him on our Patreon club meetings all the time. Henry, it was so nice to see you. It was nice meeting your family. I hope you enjoyed my lesson. I hope you enjoyed the lesson, Henry, and I hope you learned something new while you were out there. And then Ozzy and his sister Ashton, they came all the way from Fort Worth. Now that's about 5, maybe 6 hour drive. They drove all the way down there just to stop by the zoo to see me, which I was honored. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. And it was so nice meeting you. And Ozzy, as a matter of fact, I've got to set up a call with Ozzy. He is a Patreon club member as well. He's a T-Rex member. And he won the opportunity to be interviewed for a podcast. So I'm going to be interviewing Ozzy, hopefully on this next podcast that we record later this week. And then a special shout out to young Mr. Dexter. Now, Dexter has listened to every one of my podcasts, and his family listens with him. They listen when they're at home. They listen when they're on the road. Dexter is absolutely a big fan of the podcast. Well, Dexter, hope you're listening, because Dexter, your parents have given you a T-Rex membership to our club. Dexter is the newest T-Rex member of the Patreon club. They're giving it to you for your 5th birthday. So my little friend Dexter, welcome to the Patreon club. For all of you who are members of the Patreon club, thank you for being members. It certainly helps us do all of these things we do for free. And if you would be interested in becoming a Patreon club member, this is for you. Happy birthday, Dexter.
Become a member of the Dinosaur George Patreon Club and join the fun. We offer different club levels, each with their own set of benefits. Private lessons, new discoveries, behind-the-scene access, and much more are all part of being a club member. Visit dinosaurgeorge.com and sign up today.
Let's do our feature creature, shall we?
It's time for our feature creature segment. If you would like to suggest a creature, go to the Dinosaur George Kids podcast page at dinosaurgeorge.com or post your suggestion on the Dinosaur George Kids Facebook group page. Now, here is your feature creature.
Today's feature creature is the largest known terrestrial animal, that means living on land, that ever existed. It is a mammal. Somebody once asked me, why are you talking about mammals when you call yourself Dinosaur George? Well, because Mammal George sounds weird, okay? This podcast is on all prehistoric life. It doesn't just have to be dinosaurs. Well, this animal is a giant rhinoceros. Its name is Paraceratherium. It's a big name. was a big animal. It deserves a big name, right? It'd be funny if its name was like Pete. Well, that's not a very amazing name for the world's largest terrestrial mammal. It can't be called Pete or Cynthia. This is Cynthia. You know, there's nothing wrong with being named Cynthia if you're a rhinoceros, I guess. Or Pete, for that matter. But anywho, back to what I was talking about. This is a giant rhinoceros. Now, this rhino is larger than any elephant, and comparative to other dinosaurs, it's bigger than a lot of dinosaurs, bigger than a lot of dinosaurs. It would have towered over the top of a Tyrannosaurus Rex. This thing was massively huge. Now, its genus name, remember, all animals have a genus and species name. Genus is your first name. Species is your last name. So its first name, its genus name is Paraceratherium. Its last name is Transaurorlycum. I know it sounds like some made-up name. Transaurorlycum. It's Paraceratherium Transaurorlycum. Wow, that's a long name. I think Frank would be a much better name. We're going to call it Frank from this point on. Hello, Frank. Everybody say hi to Frank, the Paraceratherium Transaurorlycum. So Paraceratherium was this gigantic rhinoceros. The name means near the hornless beast. Now that's weird. That's weird. What does that mean? See, the reason why names sound so odd is most of the time paleontologists use Greek or Latin. They use Latin as the language, and the reason why I pronounce it Latin is my accent is so bad, I say Latin. Doesn't sound like there's even a T in there. Latin. That was the most common language that was used by scientists back in the early ages of science. And because a lot of scientists, regardless of what they studied, they recognized Latin as the language that they could at least all communicate with, right? You got to remember, before there was no telephones, there was no internet, there was no translation apps that you could use in your phone to speak another language. So if you were a scientist, say you lived in China, and there was a scientist in England, and there was a scientist in North America, at least the Latin words were words that they would at least be able to recognize amongst the three of them. And so that's why the name sounds so weird. So what does that name mean? It means near the hornless beast. So let me explain what that means. There was another rhino, Paraceratherium. Paraceratherium, that name means the hornless beast. So Paraceratherium is very similar to that animal. And when you look at the family tree, it was close to that animal. It was near that animal on the family tree. So near the hornless beast means that Paraceratherium was near to Paraceratherium, another hornless rhino. They're hornless rhinos. They didn't have a horn on their nose. And you might think, well, how does that, well, then why is it a rhino? When scientists put animals into groupings, you look at the skeletal feature and you put it into whichever other animals have the same features. Sometimes when you look at the skeleton of an animal, it may look like, for instance, if you saw the skeleton of a cat and you saw the skeleton of a dog side by side, if they were the same size skeletons, other than the skull, the skeletons look very, very similar. And if you didn't know what you were doing, you might go, well, these two animals are the same thing. But when you look at each bone, the shape of each bone, the number of bones in the tail, how long its shin bone is, what are some of the features of the ribs. When you look at all those little by little, you look at the evidence and you keep putting it into smaller and smaller family groups. So Paraceratherium is very similar to Paraceratherium, with the difference being size. Paraceratherium is gigantic. So you might think, well, then could it just be that the one called Paraceratherium was an adult and Paraceratherium wasn't? No, because there's also ways that helps paleontologists understand how old the animal is when they look at the bones. You know, scientists can do that with humans. When you're born, there are little lines in your skull called suture lines. It allows your head to grow. But once you reach a certain age, those little lines all kind of weld together because they're not going to grow anymore. And now it makes your skull harder. That's why we have a hard head. And so those little welded things come together and they kind of fuse. They kind of lock together for good. Well, a scientist can look at that and go, oh, this is an adult or this is a child, not just by the size. You don't pay attention to the size. Let's say, for instance, a little person. A little person who's an adult, their skull might be smaller than, say, another person, but you wouldn't then guess that this would be a younger person. It could be older, but you look at things like the suture lines in the skull and you go, aha, this is an adult. Well, the same thing with looking at prehistoric animals. There's different ways to look at them to help you figure out if this is a male or a female or an adult or a baby or a juvenile or a subadult and so on and so forth. So that's how it got its name. This is an herbivore, meaning that it eats plants. It is a quadruped, meaning to walk on four legs. Animals can be a quadruped, walking on four legs. They can be a biped, walking on two. Or they can be a biped semi-quadruped, meaning they usually walk on two, but they can walk on all four. Or they can be a quadruped semi-biped. Semi means sometimes. A semi-biped, which means they walk around on all four legs, but once in a while they can walk on their hind legs. Bears are a good example of that. So this animal is a quadruped, meaning it walks on two legs. It lived during the Oligocene period, which was 32 to 23 million years ago. It lived a very long time ago. They're found throughout Europe, Asia, and the Balkans. So the location, they were pretty successful animals. Now, when I say they're big, I'm talking about it was 4.8 meters tall. That's almost 16 feet tall. That's big. Their length was 7.4 meters. That's a little over 24 feet long. So it's much bigger than listen, this animal could look through the upstairs window of a two-story house. If you live in a house with an upstairs and a downstairs, or if you live in an apartment and you're upstairs, if you look out your windows, Paraceratherium could be looking back. It'd be like, what's up? I think that's how Paraceratheriums talk. What's up? Okay. Realistically, they probably would have went like, rum, rum, rum. But in rhino, that means, what's up? This thing weighed 15 to 20 tons. A modern elephant weighs around 3 to 5 tons. That's 33,000 or up to between 33,000 and 44,000 pounds. That's big, man. That's big. It was discovered right at the end of 1907, between 1907 and 1908. But it was described in 1989. That's a very long time. But it was very, very confusing because very few fossils were found. And to make matters worse, a lot of other fossils had been found where the scientists thought they had found something new, and so they gave it a name. Now, you see, scientists have to be very careful when they give a name to a new animal. They have to do a lot of work, due diligence. That means they work very hard and they do all the things they're supposed to do. They work very hard when you name a species. Well, if there's not a lot of evidence available when you name your species, you may not know that someone else found parts of the same animal before you and they gave it a different name. Something else to keep in mind. A long time ago, most scientists didn't really get to communicate with scientists from other countries. It wasn't that easy to do. And on top of that, some countries wouldn't allow their scientists talk to other scientists. So things that were being discovered in China in the late 1800s and 1900s weren't being shared with scientists from, let's say, Australia, because they didn't have any way to communicate. Or let's say someone in Canada discovered something and someone in Texas found the same animal. Well, you're still in North America, but you got to remember there were no phones. You could send a letter, but who would you send it to? So it wasn't like they had the availability to just pick up a phone or go online or send a fax or an email or a message. They couldn't do that back then. So here's what's very confusing about Paraceratherium. It is known by other names. So let's say I find the bones of this giant rhino and I do the best I can do to figure out what it is. I can look at its bones and I can compare it to a living rhinoceros so I know what kind of animal it is. I know it's a rhino because I can find similarities. Forget the fact that the bones are giant. I still have to look for certain details, certain things on the bone. Size doesn't matter which family you go into. Think about today. Hummingbirds are in the same family as ostriches. They're not even close. But why do they fit? Because when you look at their skeleton, there's enough similarities for them to be in the same family. So let's say I find these bones and I decide it's a giant rhinoceros, and the closest thing I can find is another rhinoceros called Paraceratherium that somebody else found before. So I'm going to name mine near the hornless rhino because it was very close to Paraceratherium, and I give it a name. Well, let's say at the same time, or maybe even a few years later, some other scientist finds bones of what they think is a new rhino and they give it a name, and somebody else. And so you could end up with one animal being given multiple names. So then how do you choose which one is the valid name, which one is supposed to be the right name? It's always the one that was named first. Paraceratherium got its name first. After that, they found one called Bellucotherium, another called Androcotherium, and another one called Pristinotherium. Well, it seems like those three are actually the same animal as Paraceratherium. So some scientists believe those three should not have gotten their own name because it had already been named. So if you ever see one called Androcotherium and it looks just like the one I'm teaching you today called Paraceratherium, you look and you go, they look the same. They probably are the same. And so as of today, Paraceratherium is the proper name to call them. Now, I described how big this thing was. I told you how big it was. Let me tell you how big its skull was, just so you have an understanding of size. Its skull is 1.3 meters long. That's 4 feet 3 inches long. I have a thought that many of you might not even be 4 feet tall. If you are 4 foot tall, if you don't know how tall you are, ask your mom or dad or grandma or aunt or uncle, whoever you're with, ask them to measure you. And then have them show you how tall 4.3 feet is, or 1.3 meters. Take a tape measure and put it next to you. What you're going to find is, for many of you, the skull of this rhinoceros is going to be as tall as you. And that's just his head. Oh man, that thing is big. That thing is huge. Okay, it did not have a horn. Rhinos don't have to have horns to be considered rhinos. The Sumatran rhino, I don't think the Sumatran rhino has a horn, does it? I don't think it does. Black rhinos do, white rhinos do. But I don't know if the Sumatran rhino, if it does, I think it's a little tiny horn. Yeah, I think it's a little tiny horn. I believe it is. But anyway, you don't have to have a horn to be a rhino. You don't have to have a horn to be a rhino. So how did it defend itself? I just told you how big it was. That's all the defense you need. No predators at its time were large enough to take. I don't even think there were predators that took on the little ones, to tell you the truth. I don't think the predators even messed with the babies, because the babies were born pretty big. And since they were probably born really big, they had what's called a very slow gestation period. That basically means how long the baby grew inside mom's tummy before it was born. It was a very long time. Sort of like giraffes and elephants. You know, animals like mice have a very short gestation period. They can have babies over and over and over and over and over again. Whereas big animals, it usually takes it longer for that baby to develop, and therefore they don't have as many babies. So if you remember in a podcast I did not too long ago about carnivores, I talked about the role of carnivores maintaining the balance of nature. Go back and listen to that. I want to think that was podcast number 102, maybe? No, 105, right? No, it was 102. I think it was 102. Was it? Man, I can't remember. Anyway, it's the one titled Carnivores. I talked about the role of carnivores maintaining the balance of nature. And I said that if you don't have carnivores, the balance of nature can become unbalanced. And if there's too many herbivores, they can eat all the plants. But I just said that there probably weren't any carnivores for Paraceratherium. So how was the balance of nature maintained? It's because of the long gestation period. It means they weren't having 5 or 6 or 7 babies a year. They were probably having one, and maybe it was over a year or 2 or 3 years before they had another. So that's another way that nature balances itself out. Because if this thing had babies all the time, they would literally eat themselves out of existence because there's no predator to hunt them. So these gigantic rhinoceroses had a very, very long gestation period, meaning that their babies were born pretty big. It's an herbivore. We can look at their teeth. Their teeth are flat for grinding. They have big molars. We have molars in the back of your upper and lower jaw. See in the back? I'm talking while my finger's in my mouth. I'm pointing to my molars. Thank you very much. Let me get back to that. Okay. Did that make sense to you all? Good. Okay, kids. Now what I want you to do is when next time you see your mom and dad, just walk up and say, Mom and Dad, let me explain my molar. Then open your mouth and go by putting your finger. Don't put it down your throat because you'll vomit. All right. By the way, these podcasts will be uploaded onto our YouTube channel. You can find me under Dinosaur George. If you want to see what that looked like, what I was just doing, you can go watch the podcast. You can see me, my finger in my mouth and talking in my microphone like I'm 7 years old. All right. Now, their teeth are flat for grinding, but scientists can look at the wear pattern. That means when you wear something out, your bottom of your tennis shoes. Let's say you get a brand new pair of tennis shoes and they have nice big ridges and all that. But as you wear them down, that becomes different. You can look at a tennis shoe and you could say this person walks a lot on dirt or gravel because the wear pattern is greater. Well, they can look at the wear pattern of the tooth, and what they find is that these animals are eating soft plants. They're not eating hard, tough plants. They're eating soft plants because their teeth demonstrate that. So this animal is eating the relatively soft vegetation. It's probably not eating off the ground. It might have been able to. I mean, it may have been able to lean down, but it's probably more likely that it's eating. So in other words, the trees are about as tall as it's growing to. It's not going to grow 5 feet taller than any tree because it doesn't make any sense. You want to be at the height of the leaves. That's what determines the size of the animal. So it's probably like a giraffe. You see giraffes walking around and they're eating out of the tops of trees because they've evolved to grow to that particular height. So from what they can tell, they were eating soft plants. Now, that leads us to something interesting. The fossil plants that were found suggests that this animal lived in a variety of different environments, desert-like environments, kind of open plains, sort of arid, meaning it didn't rain a ton. And so you got to wonder, how do they prevent themselves from overheating? There's a paleontologist who proposed a very interesting concept. I believe it was Dr. Donald Prothero. I believe he's the one that proposed it, where he suggested that maybe rather than having small ears like a rhinoceros, they may have had big flappy ears like an elephant. An elephant uses its ears to cool it down. Now, they don't wave their ears like a fan. They don't cool themselves off with the wind. What they really do is the blood from their body pumps up into the veins in their ears, and as they wave them, the blood is cooled. And it's like having an air conditioner, and that cool blood goes back down through the body. And so they're cooling themselves from the inside out. So he proposed that maybe these animals had big elephant-like ears. Unfortunately, things like the ear don't necessarily leave evidence on the skull. If you look at the skull of an elephant, if you've never seen an elephant, you may assume that it just has like two slits where its ears are. You'd never think that it had great big giant floppy ears. We know it does because we can see them now. But if we didn't know what elephants were, if all of elephants were extinct and all we ever found were their bones, we may be drawing a picture of elephants with tiny little ears. So I don't know if it had them or not. I never read the paper. I never read the scientific paper, or if he even wrote a paper. He may have just proposed the idea. But they certainly lived in an environment where that might have made sense. So of all the images that you see, it could potentially be that they have big ears. Why do artists draw them with little ears? Because we are comparing them to living animals today, comparative anatomy. We know from their bones they are rhinoceroses, and we know that all rhinos have relatively small ears, so therefore they apply those. So lastly about this giant, what caused its extinction? Listen, it didn't have predators that we know of. So what caused the extinction? Well, there could be a number of things. Number one and foremost, it would be a change in the environment, a climate change. When you're giant and your environment changes, you're the first one to suffer. Because if you're giant, you need a certain amount of food and you need a certain amount of water. And if it stops raining, you're in big trouble. Because you can't survive off of little puddles of water. You have to have a big body of water where you can drink a lot because you're big. So when the environment changes, big animals are usually the first animals to go extinct. It could have been climate change. It also could have been competition. They are living alongside of elephants. I think Gomphotheres or Dinosaurium. I don't know which ones, but they were living with elephants. And it may be possible that with elephants having a trunk, maybe that gave them some kind of advantage. I don't know what the advantage would be. I can't think of it. But it's certainly possible that over time, you're going to have animals that could outcompete you for a food source. And again, when you're big, that can be trouble. So it may be that environmental change or competition or even disease. We don't think about disease as much as we should, or I don't talk about it as much. Disease can play a big role. And one of the worst things that happens to animals that travel a lot, my guess is Paraceratherium traveled a lot because it had to keep moving to find plenty of food. If an animal that big stayed in one area a lot, it would eat itself out of existence. So by traveling a long distance, that puts you in contact with animals that maybe you've never seen before. And that is a very dangerous thing because of diseases. Paraceratherium might have a disease in its body that it's built up an immunity to it. It doesn't really bother it. It's there, but it doesn't do much to it. But that same disease could be fatal to, let's say, a prehistoric camel. Well, it's not unusual for animals to come up and sniff each other to figure out who they are. And when you're close enough to do that, one breathing out might breathe the bacteria or the virus onto the face of the other, and the other could ingest it, breathe it in. And that could cause the problems. Well, it could be reversed. Maybe camels had a disease that was devastating to Paraceratherium. Maybe that's what happened. So those kind of things are hard to tell when we're only looking at the bones. The bones tell us a lot, but they don't always tell us absolutely everything. All right, let me answer some questions from some of our listeners. By the way, hope you enjoyed this lesson. For those of you that follow us on the Dinosaur George Facebook group page, I would like for you, if you'd like to do a project, I'd like for you to try to draw a picture of Paraceratherium. I would like for you to research it and find out. You can see its spelling on both the subject matter of this podcast or on the YouTube channel podcast title listing. You can see how to look it up. I'd like for you to try to draw a picture of one. just so you can kind of see how big it is. And then put it next to something recognizable, like, for instance, draw a picture of a car next to it, or a house, or yourself. But don't draw me being stepped on it, because you do that all the time. I can already hear you rotten little kids are laughing because somebody's going to draw a picture of a giant rhinoceros stepping on me. Really? That's what you want? Is for me to get stepped on? Really?
Do you have any questions about dinosaurs? Just ask Dinosaur George. You can post your questions on the Dinosaur George Kids Facebook page or click on the Dinosaur George podcast page at dinosaurgeorge.com. Questions are chosen at random and you can submit as many as you want. And now, here's Dinosaur George.
Okay, these questions were all taken from people who had emailed us questions. We take different turns. Sometimes we answer questions that are posted on the Dinosaur George Kids Facebook group. Sometimes we send out a message to all of our Patreon Club members and give them the opportunity to ask the questions. We always give main attention is always put to our Patreon Club members because they are paying customers, right? And so they always get the priority. But every now and then, I will try to break it up a little bit. So all of these were emailed to us through our dinosaurgeorge.com Facebook page. So let's go. Ezra, age 7 from Minnesota, says, "Hey, El Stinko, how did Dylong catch its food? And what did you call me, kid? What did that kid just call me? How did it catch its food? And you were 1,000,000% El Stinko. Okay, let me tell you something, Ezra from Minnesota. I don't know who this El Stinko person is that you're talking about. I've never heard of him. Why would you call me such a name? No one knows no one knows the identity of El Stinko. No one. I'm watching you, Ezra. How did Dylong catch its food and what did it eat? Okay, so Dylong is one of the earliest ancestors of Tyrannosaurus Rex. And Dylong, I believe, still has 3 fingers. Yes, it does. Dylong has 3 fingers and relatively long arms. Dylong probably ate a variety of things, but from what I can tell, it probably focused its attention on medium to smaller prey, meaning prey that was smaller than itself. It's not really built for heavy-duty confrontational fights like when you look at its later cousin Tyrannosaurus Rex. That dude's a brute. He's looking for a fight. He's built for a confrontation. Dylong is not very large, and it's relatively slender, so I would say that it probably hunted like most dinosaurs in that it probably just spent its day walking around looking for any opportunity to catch something. It probably didn't use its hands as much, although since it's got 3 claws, that's a good indication that at least it's still using them. But it would have probably grabbed things the way a wolf does, just run up with its mouth open and grabs it the way a dog can catch food. Probably not really using its hands necessarily. And I think Dylong would have eaten anything. Small dinosaurs, it would have eaten eggs. If it could have caught a pterosaur, it would have definitely eaten lizards and snakes and little furry mammals. It would have eaten a variety of different things. Okay, this is Oliver, age 9 from Minnesota, said, "Do you believe that Jesus created everything? And if so, why do you say there were time periods? P.S. You are 100% El Stinko." Oliver, I'm not El Stinko. Okay, let me explain something about religion and paleontology and me. A lot of children listen to this podcast. And when young people listen to somebody and they become fans, a lot of times they believe whatever I say. So if I say something about dinosaurs, that they heard me say it, and they may believe me. And that's okay. But when it comes to personal matters, things like politics or religion and those kind of things, I never comment on those because that's not my place. That's a parent's responsibility. The parents have the right to talk to their children about those things. So I don't discuss anything about religion or about politics because those things aren't important to what I do. So you're welcome to ask a question. I'm glad that you did ask a question, Oliver, and it was very well written. So I don't incorporate my religious beliefs or political beliefs or social ideas or any of that stuff, because that role, my opinion might be different than a parent's opinion. And it's not fair for the parent to compete with a public figure. So that's something that to discuss with your parents. But why do I talk about time periods? Well, time periods are nothing more than us trying to understand the different layers of the earth. We give them names because we have to have a starting point, right? Like if I find animals in a certain layer, I can say they live together. But I can't say if you dig 5 feet down. I have to give that layer a name. So time periods are used by scientists to be able to divide time up and for us to be able to put things into categories. If you all listen to this podcast, you know I say scientists. Our main goal of a scientist is putting things into groups, organizing things. And history is one of those things that has to be organized. So that is why you'll hear me talk about time periods. Okay, this is from Jonah, age 4, from London. Dear Dinosaur George, your podcast is good and fantastic. That's very kind of you, Jonah. Thank you. I have an idea. You could stop singing happy birthday so Cha-Cha-Cha Raptor won't attack you. From Tricera Jonah. P.S. My daddy thinks you're El Stinko, but I don't because I know you hate El Stinko. Okay, first of all, listen, Dad. Jonah, go get your father right now and bring him over to this because this is for him. I'm going to wait just a minute for Jonah's dad. Everybody, let's all wait a minute while Jonah's dad gets off the couch and comes over here and listens to this podcast. Okay, you there, Mr. Jonah's dad? I am not El Stinko. No one knows the identity of El Stinko. No one! So, Jonah's dad, I'm keeping an eye on you. And thank you, Jonah, for knowing that I am not El Stinko. So, yeah, the Cha-Cha-Cha Raptor, that is the naughtiest animal on the planet. I hate not to sing happy birthday to members on their birthday, but I got to figure out something else. You know what I ought to do? Maybe I'll buy a suit of armor and wear that. And then when I sing happy birthday, that thing can attack me all he wants. That's what I think I'm going to do the next time. Thank you, Jonah. Thank you, Jonah's dad, for playing along. Ripley, age 6, from Orrington, Maine. What's the Triceratops horn made of? Okay, so Ripley, there's 2 pieces of a Triceratops horn. There is the horn itself, which is made of bone, and then there is the outer portion, which is made of fingernail material called keratin. There is the core and the covering. The core is always growing. It's bone. The covering is made of fingernail material. It's always growing. If they break the outside covering, it will grow back. If they break the core, it won't. So there's 2 parts of Triceratops's horn, the core and the covering. Very good question. Okay, Brody, age 6, from Allen, Texas. How do you get the fossil bones connected together and make them stay together? Brody, that's a brilliant question. When I clean dinosaur bones, as a matter of fact, next week, I'm leaving for Montana to dig dinosaurs. When I find dinosaur bones, most of the time they're broken. It happens all the time. They're broken. That's just what happens. So we use glue to glue them together while we're digging them up. We use glue to glue them together in the process so they don't fall apart when we transport them back to Texas. When I'm in the lab and I'm putting bones together, I'm cleaning the bones up, I do the same thing. I have to use glue to put them together. Now, you might be talking about the skeletons that you see in museums. So first, let me tell you this. Almost all of those skeletons, almost all of them are replicas. They are molds. See, with a replica, we can drill holes through that and put a metal rod to make the skeleton stand up. Like when you see those big T-Rexes standing up, there's actually rods, metal poles that go all through that skeleton. You can't see them because they drill through the hole, through the bones to put them there. So the animal's standing up on its own. You can't really do that with real bones because they weigh so much and they're fragile, and you can't drill a hole through a real bone, because it'll shatter. So with those, they have to make like metal sleeves to hold each bone, and it doesn't look that good because you can see the metal all over the place. So when we stand them up, usually they are using replicas, and they are drilling holes through them and putting metal rods, and that's how they stand them up. Okay, Itamar. Now, Itamar is a friend of mine. Itamar is a Patreon Club member. Itamar, 8 years old, from Mooresville, North Carolina. Do you think that T-Rex was warm-blooded? I think there should be a new classification, Itamar. I think there is hot-blooded or warm-blooded, cold-blooded, and dino-blooded. And I say that because dinosaurs have reptilian ancestry, but they also have the skeletal design of a fast-moving, warm-blooded animal. So I think they were sort of in between the two. I think that they could have the slow metabolism if food was tight, food was hard to find. They could slow their bodies down. Their bodies didn't need to burn through the calories the way a warm-blooded animal does. But when they needed to take off running, then they could warm themselves up and do it because they're warm-blooded. We do know that they were found in the polar regions, meaning that they lived in places that got very cold and stayed dark for months on end. So it would suggest that those animals were warm-blooded because cold-blooded animals can't live in those environments. So I would say that they are closer to warm-blooded than anything else. Okay, Matthias, age 9, from Bothwell, Washington. Hey, DG, can you do a podcast on Gigantopithecus? Hey, that's a good suggestion, Matthias. That's a good suggestion. Gigantopithecus is a gigantic ape-like animal. I believe the last thing I read about it was it's more like an orangutan. I might try to do that. That's a good one. Okay. This is from Mina from Ireland. Mina, my ancestors came from Ireland. They were Noonans, and so they came from Ireland. I'm going to go back one day. What age are you? Mina, I think I'm 64. I can't ever remember. I was born in 1961. I was born December 18th, 1961. If you guys are good at math, figure it out. I don't remember how old I am, but I'm somewhere around. I think I'm 63 or 60. Maybe I'm 64. I don't know. I never think about it, honestly. I've had a long time joke that I play that I say I'm 39. I should have answered 39, but I would be lying. All right. Andrew, age 5, from San Ramon, California. Are T-Rex and Tarbosaurus similar? Your new fan from California, Andrew. Well, Andrew, glad you're a fan, my friend. And congratulations for having your question chosen to be read on a podcast. Not everybody gets that. Yeah, T-Rex and Tarbosaurus are so similar, Andrew, that there is still a lot of debate whether they're going to change Tarbosaurus's name to Tyrannosaurus. At the beginning of this podcast, remember I said that everything has a genus and species name? Right now, Tarbosaurus's genus name is Tarbosaurus and its species name is Batar, but they're thinking about changing the genus to Tyrannosaurus. So there would be Tyrannosaurus Rex, Tyrannosaurus Batar, because they are so closely related to each other. Tarbosaurus is the Asian version. So yes, they are very, very similar. Similar enough to where some scientists suggest that the name should be changed to Tyrannosaurus. That's a great question. This is from Eli, age 4.5, from Villanova, Pennsylvania. Is a pigeon a dinosaur? Yes, it is, Eli. It's an avian dinosaur. There are two groups of dinosaurs, terrestrial and avian. I used the word terrestrial at the beginning at this podcast when I was describing Paraceratherium. Do you remember what terrestrial means? You guys remember what I said terrestrial means? Living on land. There are terrestrial dinosaurs, which means they lived on land, and there are avian dinosaurs, which means bird. So yes, pigeons are indeed classified as birds. All right, this is Hugo, age 6, from New Zealand. Kaiora. I think I pronounced Kaiora? Kaiora. That's a traditional New Zealand greeting. And if I mispronounce it, please don't be offended. But if I pronounce it correctly, Kaiora, to you too, my friend Hugo. My question is, or Hugo's question is, What is so irritating about Irritator? Love your show. I listen to every episode lots of times. Hugo, that is so kind of you, and thank you for liking the show. So what is so irritating about Irritator? Well, first of all, they named the dinosaur Irritator. The word irritator means to irritate, to bother you, to make you mad. So what happened, if my recollection is correct about Irritator, first of all, Irritator fits in with the Spinosaurids. The Irritator, Suchomimus, Baryonyx, all those dudes, Spinosaurus. I believe a farmer is the one that found the skeleton, the bones of Irritator. And that farmer tried to dig them up, but ended up causing a lot of damage because he didn't know what he was doing and he broke a lot. And then I believe he tried to fix them by using cement, if my memory is the same from then, where he actually tried to patch them back together with cement. By the time they contacted paleontologists to come look at it, the paleontologists were so irritated at what happened to the skeleton, they named the dinosaur Carlos. No, they named it Irritator. That's the story. And finally, Jess, age 7 from Taiwan. Which dinosaur has the sharpest teeth? Google said it's T-Rex, but I disagree with that. I think T-Rex has the strongest teeth. Jess, I think you're right. I think you're right, my friend. Absolutely you're right. Tyrannosaurus Rex teeth are not sharp. They have a sharp edge, but they are not sharp. Their teeth are actually rounded. Their teeth are round because they're made to be powerful, to crack through bone. The sharpest teeth that I've ever seen probably belong to Troodon. Troodon has these weird teeth. On one side, these big lumpy serrations, and on the other, very fine serrations. Troodon teeth, Dromaeosaurus teeth, Velociraptor teeth. A lot of the small or to mid-sized carnivores had very, very sharp little teeth. The bigger ones' teeth tended not to be as sharp, especially with the points, because they would break when they would bite into something because their jaw muscles are big. Usually the smaller the animal, the sharper the teeth. So I would say that it could be one or several of those little guys. All right, we only have a few more minutes left. Let's answer some...
Who would win? What if two different prehistoric creatures fought? Who would win? T-Rex versus a giant wolf? Raptor versus terror bird? Spinosaurus versus Triceratops? You choose the animals, and Dinosaur George will size them up and pick a winner. Now, get ready. It's time to find out who would win.
All right, let's take a look at some of these. Let's start with, this is an interesting one. Spinosaurus versus Tyrannosaurus Rex versus Baryonyx versus Eoraptor. Well, here's what's going to happen. Eoraptor is going to sit on the side and just watch. What's going to happen is Eoraptor is going to watch, and Eoraptor is going to see Tyrannosaurus Rex do away with Baryonyx in very short order. Very short order. And that leaves Spinosaurus and Tyrannosaurus. And honestly, I waffle back and forth between these two because I've had a lot of people ask me about Spino and T-Rex and who would win. And I always end up picking Tyrannosaurus Rex simply because of its bite force. Spinosaurus could cause a lot of damage, but I personally believe that Tyrannosaurus Rex just simply is too powerful. So I would choose Tyrannosaurus Rex. And this is from Therizino Bentley, in case I didn't mention that. So that leaves Tyrannosaurus Rex and Eoraptor. Tyrannosaurus Rex is so tired after this battle. Eoraptor simply walks up, crawls up his leg, crawls onto his back, crawls up on top of his back, all the way over to his neck, on top of his head, opens up his pocket. He has a little pebble in it, and he bonks Tyrannosaurus Rex on the head. And Tyrannosaurus faints. And the winner is Eoraptor! And the crowd goes crazy. All right. Let's see. Boplodicus says, who would win? Shantungosaurus versus Stegosaurus. This is interesting. Shantungosaurus is the sauropod with the club-like tail. And that tail has much more flexibility. Wait, am I thinking about... Wait. Or is Shantungosaurus... Wait. Is Shantungosaurus the giant hadrosaur? Okay. I think Shantungosaurus is the giant hadrosaur, the duckbill, right? I think it is. I was thinking about Omeosaurus or one of those other ones with the club tail. Oh my gosh, I can't remember which one Shantungosaurus is right now. Who was the giant duckbill? Wasn't it Shantungosaurus? Okay, I'm going to assume, Boplodicus, that we're talking about the giant duckbill versus Stegosaurus. Well, Shantungosaurus is giant compared to Stegosaurus. Shantungosaurus definitely has a tail which could be used as a weapon, but really, Shantungosaurus doesn't have an offensive weapon, meaning a weapon that could be used to inflict major injury. That tail could certainly do damage, but with Stegosaurus having a tail spike, one swipe of that tail to the legs of Shantungosaurus, and that dinosaur is not going to be able to walk. And if anything, may not even be able to stand up, and that's going to put it in a very precarious predicament where I believe that it would win that fight. I believe it would. Okay, Parcasaurus Rex would like to know who would win Utah Raptor versus Deinonychus. I like this fight a lot. I really like this fight a lot. Utah Raptors have the size. Deinonychus has the speed. So the question would be, which of the two would benefit most? If it's a one-on-one fight, I think Deinonychus could probably sidestep the attack. Meaning, if a lion attacked a cheetah, the lion just simply would have a hard time catching the cheetah. So I think that would sort of be the same situation here, that Utah Raptors more heavily built, a little more stout, a little more sturdy. And I think that Deinonychus would have been much quicker, but it still possessed the weaponry necessary to be able to win this fight. So I would say, in my opinion, Deinonychus might be able to win this fight. I think it would. I think it would be kind of cool. All right, let's go with this one from my assistant, Noah, who says, Megalosaurus versus Siberian tiger in the snow. Wow. Now that's nice to throw it in a little bit. I like when you submit these who would wins. And by the way, you have to be a member of the T-Rex Patreon Club to be able to submit these. It's great when you take animals and you throw in the environment that they're in. Because if this fight would have been simply on land, Megalosaurus would have every advantage over the Siberian tiger. But when you threw in the snow, that changed the whole dynamic of the fight. Because now you've got an animal in Megalosaurus that is not made for being in the snow. Siberian tiger, that's its home court. And it's got home court advantage. A Siberian tiger would have been capable to run and leap and probably land on the hip of Megalosaurus and crawl up on its back. And once he's there, there's not much the Megalosaurus can do. Its arms cannot reach behind it to get rid of it, and it can't turn its head far enough around to get rid of it. I think the Siberian tiger could inflict enough injuries to be able to cause a tremendous amount of damage. I personally think they could. That's really good. That was a good one. Okay, let me see. And by the way, for all of you Patreon Club members, the way we answer these, what happens if you're a Patreon Clubber is every now and then we just send out a message saying, hey, please submit your who would wins. And so that's how you submit them if you are a member. And then when you do, sometimes we get 200 or 300 submissions. Then we just randomly go down and click on them and pick on them. And that's how it's chosen, just so that you know. Let's see. This is from Alistrosaurus Rex. Would like to know 2 T-Rexes versus 2 Spinosaurus versus 2 Carcharodontosaurus. Now this is an interesting concept. And here's what I think. I think Tyrannosaurus Rex probably hunted in pairs, or at least with other members. I think Carcharodontosauruses hunted with other members. But Spinosaurs, in my opinion, were solitary hunters. And therefore, even if there was 2 of them, if they don't work together, if they're not like a tag team that function together, they're not going to really help each other out because they don't know what the other one's going to do. So they would be big and menacing, but they probably wouldn't know how to work as a cohesive unit. We find evidence of tyrannosaurs that are found together in family groups. We have evidence of Carcharodontosaurs. So therefore, I think Carcharodontosaurus and Tyrannosaurus rexes probably hunted or lived in groups, and therefore they would be more effective having a partner. Now, that then brings us to, okay, so of those two, Carcharodontosaurus and Tyrannosaurus rex, who's going to be the victor? Man. I think Carcharodontosaurus has some advantage. I think it couldn't inflict the bite force of a Tyrannosaurus rex, but it's still a big animal. And if they are able to get a couple of good bites in on one of the Tyrannosauruses, they're going to cause a lot of excessive bleeding. And if that occurs, then that Tyrannosaur is not really going to stand a whole lot of a chance to be able to defend itself. All right, my friends. So that wraps up this podcast. To everybody out there, I hope you enjoyed it. Remember, if you are in or around San Antonio on July 6th and 7th or August 17th and 18th in the year 2024, come out to the San Antonio Zoo and come hear me do a lecture and let me meet you in person. For everyone out there, be kind, be nice. We live in a time where social media can cause a lot of people to become very angry. It's becoming a place where people like to argue. And so step away from it every now and then. There's nothing wrong with it, but step away from it. Take a deep breath. Enjoy the world around you. Spend your time with your family. Spend your time going outside. Getting outside is one of the best things you can do as a family. To all of you parents and guardians that allow your children to listen and who listen with your children, you're what makes the world a better place because you're raising good citizens. So good on all of you. Everybody, take care of yourself. Remember, if you're going to draw a picture of Paraceratherium on the Dinosaur George Kids Facebook group, don't make it standing on me. All right, you guys, we'll talk to you soon. Take care, everybody.
Thank you for listening to Dinosaur George Kids. Join the Dinosaur George Kids Facebook group, become a member of our Patreon club, and check out our website store for cool fossils, rocks, and crystals. Visit dinosaurgeorge.com for details. Until next time, keep digging for knowledge.